Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Modcast, episode 44.
Woo!
Yeah.
It's 44 episodes of entertainment, in quotation marks.
Sure, let's go with that. So, I'm Waj.
I'm Slime.
And I am John Smith.
We're gonna be talking about another Netflix original series done by Dreamworks. It's another animated show, Trollhunters. Currently, it only has one season released, and we are going to talk about all manner of spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, just go watch it. Even though I think, are gonna probably sound negative towards a lot of aspects, yeah, I don't know. It's still a good show, I think. It's worth watching, I guess.
If nothing else, which, to say, if nothing else makes it sound like this is the only good thing about it, but the animation in Trollhunters is actually spectacular. I mean, yes, it's cartoony, but it's done in the best way. There's a lot of texture to things. The trolls have this rocky skin, and it looks and even sounds rocky. So, the first season is all about Jim discovering the troll world, and I felt like the pacing in the first half of the season was really good, as far as, slowly introducing the different concepts of, the different types of trolls. It starts off with just the regular trolls that live in Troll Market. It's Blinky and Arg. And then it kind of goes into introducing the gnomes, and then introducing the goblins, and then introducing the changelings.
That's one of the things that I really like about the show, is those first few episodes where they're showing the mechanics of the various creatures, how the goblins have this whole hierarchy system that's denoted by a Sharpie mustache. The gnomes that if you take off their hat, they'll just go berserk. And all of that comes into play, knowing those mechanics, later in the season when they're fighting the changelings. Because the changelings are controlling some goblins, but since they know that if you get one of the changelings to splatter them, they'll become mutinous. I really like the mechanics of the various creatures, even though they're not unique creatures for fantasy. Goblins and gnomes are standard fare, but it's nice that they have different ways of reacting to situations, which makes it unique.
The mechanic that I find the most interesting out of all the troll mechanics is the fact that the trolls, when exposed to daylight, turn to stone. It's something that's never really forgotten. In some series, it might just be, that's just for one episode, or you might get around that some way, but it's something that's never really forgotten throughout the entirety of the season, where even the villains, like Bular, there's this scene where they're fighting in a sewer, and there's a stream of light, and you see that Bular has to go around the light. He has to avoid it, because if he touches it, he gets turned to stone too.
That mechanic of having daylight be an ever-present threat to the trolls is really neat, because I remember having watched Gargoyles, which is another animated show, that essentially had the same thing with the characters turning into stone as daylight came, although the difference was that they could not avoid daylight, even if they were to stay in dark areas. If it was morning, they'd still turn to stone. So I really like that it just is dependent on the exposure to light, because it keeps them more active, I find, the characters. Because I recall in Gargoyles, they'd always have to transition to night. Most of the story would take place at night, because of course, nothing would happen at day. All the characters are asleep, they're in stone. And the fact that in Gargoyles, they turn to stone, but then they break out of it at night. With this, it's basically a death sentence. So it keeps them on their toes throughout the season.
Let's start picking on Voltron. How would you say the mechanics of the show, especially the consistency compares to Voltron? Because one of the things that kind of bothered me with Voltron is they'd introduce, say, a new planet or whatever, but then it wouldn't really be relevant in the long run. And so the world building all felt really disjointed. Whereas in this, everything stays relevant all through the show.
There's a couple of things where I find the show is a bit weird in the backstory of the actual troll hunters. He has this device that takes in these various stones that he can use, and I'm like, how and why? If there are only a limited amount of those stones, how was this power even activated in the past? How did that all work? The backstory of the actual troll hunter. Maybe they'll go into it. Maybe Merlin will show up, talk about his daylight.
Yeah, I have a feeling they're going to explain it because Angor Rot, there was a flashback scene to him where he went to Baba Yaga around the year 1000, and that's how he turned into what he became. So I feel like they're going to do more with that time period and explain how the amulet was created and so on and so forth.
Right.
I could be wrong, but I don't think they would have had that flashback if they didn't plan on exploring that time period some more.
Yeah, I definitely feel like they're going to go back and explore the origins of the medallion. Just because, like the whole mantra, this phrase or whatever is...
With the power of Merlin, daylight
With
is
the
my
power
command.
of Merlin, yeah. Daylight
Yeah.
is my command. Who is Merlin? I mean, obviously Merlin is probably the same wizard as in whatever he's from. So, who is Merlin? Is Merlin a human? Is Merlin a troll? It would make more sense if Merlin was a troll, considering the fact that there's only ever been troll hunters, apparently.
No, I think it'll turn out that he is a human, partly just because in every fictional appearance and, his mythological origins, he's always been a human. But also, I think they'll probably use that to sort of show how the trolls' prejudice against humans is largely unfounded. That just seems like something a TV show would do.
Yeah, I guess. Although, at this point, especially after Jim has vanquished Bular, the trolls were more accepting of him. And especially, now that he's vanquished Angor Rot and stuff. So maybe, I do definitely think, that is good that it has that mystery of it, but I don't know. It's just strange. I am, how does this device work? Why is it bounded? But even that isn't really that consistent. How he kind of throws it away and it's pops back.
It depends on how he becomes separated from it. If it's stolen from him, then it'll return. But if he just forgets it or whatever, then it won't. I think that's how it works. To some degree, I think that's just kind of the nature of fantasy. Some things don't have explanations, in part because ultimately nothing actually makes sense.
I guess so. Although the show does a good job, I think, at explaining its mechanics and stuff. And I was just I guess I just wanted more of an explanation of things.
Yeah, I felt like the introduction of Arg's family, the whatever trolls they're called, and they come from even deeper caves.
The light-sensitive tribe.
Yeah, how they're even more light-sensitive than the trolls of Troll Market, which makes sense. The deeper down you go, the more sensitive you are to light. So it feels natural, the trolls turning to stone with light.
There's that object that they use to send Gnome Chomsky into the Dark World. It's like a tiny portal. And at one point, Toby kind of sticks his head into the Dark World. And I'm like, Jim could probably fit through that. Why does he have to use the gate or whatever, why doesn't he just use that? I guess they do kind of explain that it's only smaller objects, I guess, that can pass through it. I guess maybe it's just the certain dimension that has a limit on it. That if you try to squeeze anything else, I don't know, maybe it severs your body or something. I don't know.
Well, no, that can't be it, because with a big enough portal, they can get Gunmar through, and the changelings are bigger than Noam Chomsky, and they can get through.
Well, yeah, but the changelings that are sent through are, not Enrique sized.
Yeah.
And it's clarified that not Enrique could have gone through the portal, but he refused to, because why would he? So presumably, if you're baby sized or smaller, you could fit through. The fact that Toby is able to fit his entire head, that would be, fine if it was, a normal sized human head, but Toby's head is giant.
It is.
Yeah, I think it's a cartoon show, and you're not supposed to think about that.
The thing about the Dark Portal, though, is that they do acknowledge it. Jim says something along the lines of, what if we use the shrink ray machine to get in? But then I'm like, well, the more I think about it, it's does it take into account the body dimensions and stuff? But I guess, okay, maybe we shouldn't think about it too much, even though the show does acknowledge that maybe there's an alternate solution.
Repeat to yourself, it's just a show, I should really just relax.
I especially like the various weapons that they have and how they introduce them. The Shadow Staff is something that Claire steals from Angor Rot, and they have a whole episode dedicated to the whole anti-gravity thing that's infused with the hammer.
Let's talk more broadly about the characters. They're all very archetypal, I'm not actually sure how to pronounce that. That being said, I don't think uniqueness equates to good when it comes to characters. To some degree, you don't want to be too cliche or you'll just be totally boring. But I think this show does enough to flesh out the particulars of the characters to still be good. Jim is the everyman, but in particular, he really cares about his mom. He has to keep a troll hidden in his basement. He has his bromance with Toby.
The whole mother father-son relationship leads into some interesting conflicts that happen later on, where Strickler basically has her bonded to him, so like any pain that he experiences, she does as well. And so like that's unique, I find. The characters might not be the most unique, but the actual interactions that it leads to is quite intriguing.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, and that's really what I mean when I say the show has better characters than Voltron does, because I think by and large the character relationships on Voltron are very static. You know, once they meet each other, they pretty much settle into a groove and stay there for the most part, with a couple of exceptions.
Unless you're Keith and Lance, and then it's, oh, we're rivals, oh, we're friends now, oh, we're rivals again, oh, we're friends now, oh, we're rivals again. Now that you say that, I agree that Trollhunters has better character interaction than Voltron does. I think overall, if I had to say, Trollhunters is probably better than Voltron, but it is not perfect. The reason why it is not perfect is because of a certain character who is introduced in like the first episode, but doesn't become a main character until the second half of the season.
Slime, I don't know who you mean. You're not being very clear about this.
Claire Nunez, the most greatest character of all time. I had no issues with Claire in the first half of the season. She's kind of this background character. She's still driving some things, because obviously Jim is like wanting to like protect her and like trying to do with the whole play with her. And I felt like the Romeo and Juliet thing in the background of the first half of the season was really interesting to me, just because Jim isn't just focusing on this one thing, he's also focusing on the other end. I felt like Claire did a really great job with that, and she feels the part of kind of this nerdy, a little bit booky type girl who's questioning why he's always like running off, and she's sometimes mad at him and sometimes she's not. She doesn't really have a whole lot of character, but that's fine because she's a background character, so it's not needed. In the second half of the season, she becomes more involved in Team Trollhunters, and I'm just gonna go ahead and read and quote the Trollhunters Wikipedia page, which cites Claire as being Jim's friend and love interest. She is a feisty, kind, jolly, sarcastic, curious, and intelligent tomboy who enjoys reading books and is a talented martial artist and gymnast. If that does not scream Mary Sue to you, I am very sorry, but it does. It's bad. All she's missing is, oh, actually, I'm a really good artist, too.
They definitely went overboard with giving her character too many positive attributes and not enough negative ones.
Name me one negative attribute she has! Name one!
In one episode, she lied to her parents, but then it never came up again.
That's not even a negative trait. It's because it didn't even make any kind of impact. The issue is that first episode of the second season, she's like, oh yeah, I learned how to read troll. Oh yeah, I learned how to speak troll perfectly without help in a month. Yep. And it's just like, no, that's not how it happens. Not even the most brilliant minds in the world can do that. That is not something human. If you were inhuman, fine, whatever. I can accept that. But you are human. Unless there is some unrevealed plot point where she is actually half changeling or something like that.
Yeah, I do wonder if they are going to go that route. But I don't know. That's maybe stretching it. I think it's probably just that she's a Mary Sue. You know.
So, yeah, to not exactly argue, because I do agree that she is kind of a Mary Sue. That being said, a lot of TV characters are Mary Sues when you think about it, and have more skills than you could possibly accrue in a lifetime. Even with Jim, he seems to learn how to fight trolls who are hundreds of years old and have all sorts of experience at fighting and are way bigger than he is. He seems to learn how to fight them really quickly.
Well, I think the difference is speed. Because he's smaller, he has more maneuverable.
They do actually show him learning, even if it is kind of insanely fast, which makes it feel less stupid.
There is that one episode when she has the Shadow Staff. Like, the Shadow Staff reacts to their strong emotions or something like that. And so really, it's like any negative feelings that she's having is usually just caused by other characters to get her to use the Shadow Staff. So in retrospect, it's just like even more added to that.
Yeah. My hate only makes me stronger.
Going back to the character relationships, she does bother me, but she doesn't bother me that much. And it's because she still has her relationship with Jim going on. And she also, by being so ridiculously perfect, kind of motivates him to do better than he would otherwise. Even though she is too perfect, it doesn't detract from the rest of the show, really.
I don't know. Like, where she is the driving point of the whole series, really. I feel like in order to care about Enrique in the Shadow Realm.
You have to care about the relationship, you know?
Exactly, yeah. You have to care about the relationship, which requires caring about the character, which, if the character isn't there, then it makes it difficult to care. So, like, if Claire is such a Mary Sue, why doesn't she just go to the Shadow Realms and rescue Enrique for herself?
Yeah, okay. I just thought, like, they use the Shadow Staff to, like, transport out of Troll Market. And so I'm like, can they just transport into the Dark World? Like, with that? Like, is that gonna happen in Season 2? Like, is that gonna be a plot point? Because at that point...
Oh, please, no.
Like,
please, no.
Yeah, man. Like, transportation to the Dark World. How does it work?
Presumably, it's a dimensional thing that the staff can't do. Because I'm guessing...
I guess?
No, the Shadow Staff in general, I would prefer if it was more like Umarak's powers in Journey to One. Sorry, I just threw... how Umarak's powers in Journey to One work, where, you know, you melt into the shadows and you have to have shadows in order to travel. That I would greatly prefer if the Shadow Staff worked like that, instead of just creating this magical floating thing in the air. And I thought that's how it worked when it was introduced with Angor Rot. And I thought that's how it was going to work, but apparently not. That killed the second half for me. I was enjoying it so much. Like, I had on the boards, I had my title set to, I'm binging Trollhunters. It's actually really good. And then I started the second half of the season. I'm like, I'm not enjoying this now. Why am I not enjoying this as much? I thought about it and I was like, it's Claire. It all ties back to Claire. Because she is such a Mary Sue, it detracts from the rest of the series because everything else before it was so good, and now that makes it not good.
I definitely agree that the second half of the season wasn't as good as the first half, and Claire is a major component there. I think another part of it is that Angor Rot ended up not really being the greatest villain. He started out really well, but then after a certain point, he ended up basically just being another crazy bad guy who just wants to kill the good guys because he wants to kill them.
Yeah, I thought they were going to set up something really cool with Angor Rot because, you know, they show that backstory where, you know, like, he was the good guy and he tried to gain more power and then he's kind of forced to kill all the Trollhunters. And you're like, oh, wow, that's why he wants to kill all the Trollhunters. And then he loses his ring and he still wants to kill everyone. Which, I mean, I guess, like, the whole reason why he wanted the ring back is because it had his soul in it or something.
I liked the second half of Trollhunters. I didn't really mind Claire's Mary Sue-ness all too much. I did like where they were going with Angor Rot, and him sort of at the end becoming like insane, just out for vengeance. It fit with his character, especially like how it ties in with Strickler and how he seeks refuge in Jim's house and stuff.
Oh yeah, Strickler was definitely the highlight.
Oh yeah, definitely.
From the beginning, I did like Strickler, just because the introduction with Strickler, he's talking about Thucydides and the Peloponnesian War. I thought that the opening with the Peloponnesian War, I was just like, oh, I know what that is. Cool. And I thought, this guy's cool. And then he's evil. And I'm like, oh, well, I still think this guy's cool. I thought the progression of, it's not revealed that he's a changeling right away. You just know he's evil and you don't really know what he is. And then the changelings are introduced and you're like, oh, he's a changeling.
When you find out, it also ties in with Enrique getting nabbed.
Yeah.
That's all fine and dandy. Or like what they did with Strickler, you know, the fact that he's like his teacher masquerading and then he becomes like the principal somehow.
Yeah, that part was a little bit weird. It's like, I went away for like 8 months. I'm principal now. I'm just curious why no one questions this. Like, no one says, oh, hey, why have you been gone for a month during the middle of the school year? Oh, hey, you're the principal now? Okay, cool.
And then there's the ending with his mom losing her memory and him not saying anything about the troll world. Amnesia is just like such a common trope. And I'm like, alright, just this once, you know? Like, I know she was at a hospital and stuff, but like after that, like, it could have been something. It's just gonna be a case where they're gonna have to go through the whole thing again. Yeah. But yeah, season 2, what do you guys speculate for that?
Well, first off, we should mention that the voice actor for Jim, Anton Yelchin, actually died in a car accident in June of last year. So I think from what I've read, season 2 is going to have some of his voice work, because I think they did voice some stuff ahead of time.
Plot-wise, what do you think is going to happen with him in the Dark World without any backup whatsoever?
I have a feeling either he's not going to stay there very long, or the thrust of the next arc will be the other characters trying to meet him there, and maybe he'll uncover some dark secrets while he's there or something.
If I had to take a guess, it's going to probably explore the Gum Gums, their motivations as to what they're doing and why they're evil evil. I feel like it's the sort of show where it's going to say, well, okay, this is why these trolls are motivated in this way,
right,
and this is why these trolls are motivated in this way. As far as, like, was there a big fight over whether they should just kill all the humans?
That would make sense, considering, like, Arg's whole backstory and stuff. What I think will happen is there'll be some plot with changelings and their organization, because they're still out there, the changelings that conspired with Strickler in his whole, like, grand scheme all over the world. That's gonna come up, probably.
What did you guys think about the human Blinky mini arc? I thought that was one of the biggest examples of wasted potential on the show.
They did do a few things with it, with him being his, like, guidance counselor.
It didn't have any long-term impact.
Right. It was pretty much used for a little bit of, like, lying shenanigans and toilet humor.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, oh, I get to step in the sunlight now. And, oh, I might get to drive a human car, except for I don't get to do that until I turn back into a troll. Overall, it's good. I will say again, I do think it is probably better than Voltron, even though the second half of the season wasn't necessarily as enjoyable as the first half. It was overall had a higher quality than Voltron, which is not bad quality in my opinion, but it is of a lesser, more consistent quality.
It's a good, fun, kind of Saturday morning cartoon type of show. Maybe that's selling it a bit short.
Yeah.
It is selling it a bit short, I feel like.
That was the Modcast. Alright, thanks for listening. Goodbye, everyone. Kicking in the grass nuts.
Memes.